Well, it's time for our political panel, and joining us this afternoon in a moment, Peter Khalil will be here, the Assistant Defence Minister. Leah Blythe, though, is the Shadow Assistant Minister. She's the Shadow Assistant Minister for Defence Infrastructure. Welcome to you, Leah. We'll start with you while we wait for Peter Khalil as well. Really interesting ideas that just came about there. The Assistant Multicultural Affairs Minister has made some really interesting comments about the school system and people being segregated. I wonder how you reflect on that. Do you think that that's a problem, that we have too much of this separation in our system?
Look, I probably take a slightly different slant to that, where I think parents should have the choice where they want to send their children to school, and whether that's homeschooling, whether that's a faith-based education, or they go to a state school. I think that should be up to parents, and I think when government starts trying to intervene to force parents into doing things that they may not feel comfortable doing, I'm not sure that that's the approach, certainly, that a Liberal Party would take.
Yeah, I suppose the issue, though, is about that kind of segregation that it leads to, and clearly we want people to be, mixing more. That would certainly help social cohesion, you would think. Peter Khalil, actually, Julian Hill said that he was at a forum that you organised where someone raised this idea with him of, being concerned about their kids mixing, and I know lots of us think about that. I certainly have with my kids. You want to make sure that they're mixing with as many different people as possible. Yeah. Is that something that needs to be addressed in terms of policy?
Well, it's an interesting question because, as a matter of principle, like you said, Patricia, I agree. As a parent, it's important for our kids to be able to engage with so many different people from different backgrounds, from ethnic backgrounds, faith backgrounds, socioeconomic, gender diversity as well, because that helps our children to, socialise effectively. And then the second point would be, as a matter of principle, there should be choice. Parents should be given as much choice as possible as well to fit their child in the school that works for them. So how much you can impose or prescribe through policy to ensure there is that level of mixing is a difficult question, because it bumps up against this issue of choice as well. My view on this is that I don't think it's a good thing for our society to have too much separation of different groups. It doesn't mean they all have to go to school together. There might be other ways that you can engage kids in society through sports competition, through cultural exchanges and so on. So there's a better understanding of different perspectives. And I think that's actually a very important part of education, to really understand the other perspective and to really experience the diversity of different traditions and backgrounds.
I want to move to the threat that was made to the Prime Minister and start with you, Leah. Obviously, it's upsetting, disturbing, worrying. Are threats to politicians making it difficult for you guys to do your jobs?
I think I will start off with saying that I'm glad that the Prime Minister is okay, and it is appalling to see the rise of threats being made to not just politicians but anyone who is speaking out publicly. I think it starts getting people to self-censor in terms of what they're willing to go out and publicly say. I don't think it has any place in Australia. I look back and as a young person watching someone like a former Prime Minister like Bob Hawke being able to go to the cricket, and commentators from the US saying, wow, that's remarkable that you can have former Prime Ministers out without security details. That's the kind of Australia that I love. When we have disagreements, we can settle that in debate. We can have, some pretty robust debates with words. But when it starts escalating to violence and threats, that is putting our very way of life at risk. And I want to see that kind of behaviour stamped out here. It's not acceptable from anyone to anyone.
And just staying with you, Leah, the Prime Minister keeps saying, turn the temperature down. He said that today at a forum. He got actually big applause. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think we do need to turn the temperature down. Australia is a remarkable multicultural country, and I am a first-generation Australian. My grandparents came over here with my parents from both England and India and Burma, and I think we are an enormous success story globally of what a multicultural nation can look like. And I think we all need to turn the temperature down a little and just be grateful and look at what we have in common. And look at what we have achieved over many, many years. And I think it is going back to those Australian values and what makes living in Australia. And I was reflecting at the Australia Day ceremonies that, you know, to be an Australian citizen and to be born an Australian citizen is truly to have won the lottery in life. And I think we need to start getting back and making sure that people who are here understand what the Australian way of life is, what our values are, and we should be doing everything we can to uphold and defend them.
Peter Khalil, I mean, you've had issues in your own electorate, threats to you in your office. Has it become harder to do your work?
Well, yes and no, Patricia, but Leah's kind of right. I mean, Bob Hawke, you mentioned Bob Hawke. When I go down Sydney Road to get a coffee or grab lunch or something, people always constantly remind me of the fact that Bob used to walk up and down Sydney Road. When he was Prime Minister and the MP for Wills, he used to come down here once every Tuesday, not every day. But that's certainly a feature and attribute of Australia, that accessibility that we have with our democratic representatives. I think the difficulty here is that, you know, we all agree we want to bring the temperature down. We all agree that it's important that we are able to disagree respectfully or peaceably, even if we vehemently disagree, that we don't resort to the incitement of hatred to others based on their gender, their ethnicity, their faith, or their other attributes, that we don't resort to violence in that respect. So I think the actual question here is why? Why are people resorting to violence in order to actually express themselves? I mean, I think we'd all agree that it's not a legitimate form of expression. There are other avenues to express your political views rather than violence. And in fact, the democratic system itself is based on the idea that we can actually disagree vehemently with each other and we can try and sort this out through debate, potentially consensus, and then voting things through a parliamentary system. But at a societal level, people also have to have that commitment. The reason we have had a successful multicultural, multi-faith, multi-ethnic society is because millions of migrants, my parents included, yours, Leah's obviously, came to this country and made a commitment to the idea that they can actually live with neighbours from all over the world, even if they disagree with them, and still live peaceably. They made a commitment to that idea. It's an idea. And that is beyond the law. That's something that we have to commit to every day, the idea that, well, I might disagree with you, but I'm not going to resort to hatred or violence towards your person. And that I think is breaking down. When we talk about social cohesion, that's where cohesion breaks down, when people think it's legitimate to use violence.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it's become a disturbing trend. Just very briefly, because we're nearly at the end of the show, but I'm really interested in this. First to you, Leah. It's being reported that some Liberal MPs are keen to back this push to expand Parliament because dozens of new seats could be created. It might rejuvenate your party. Would you like to see a bigger Parliament?
Look, I think that is certainly something that the Labor Party have floated to do. In terms of whether it would be beneficial to everyday voters, that's the test that I think we need to be looking at. I don't think we should be looking at it from the perspective of, is there advantage for one party or another? Is it going to better serve the Australian people? Is it good value for money for the Australian people? I mean, I don't take for granted that it's the taxpayer who pays my salary, and obviously by expanding Parliament, we make Parliament more expensive. So what's the value for money in it for the taxpayer? And that's the test that I'm certainly looking at this through.
And just the last 30 seconds to you, Peter Khalil.
Very, very quickly. Look, I saw those reports. I think you mentioned, is it hard to actually represent a community? Well, the size of electorates have grown, really increased. So 200,000 people in my electorate, 120,000 voters. You know, I've probably spoken to 10,000 people in the last 6 months, but it's hard to represent communities when they're that large. And I think, going to Leah's point, how does it help us be a better democracy in order for us to have that accessibility with the communities that we represent? The last time it actually was increased, I think, during the Hawke government, where the size of Parliament increased because the size of the electorates were increasing as well.
Yeah, it is the last time. It'll be interesting to see if this advances. You've been a great panel. Thank you, Leah, and thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
PK.